Hello, everybody. I am super excited for us to be jumping into Chiron. Now, Chiron isn't one of the things that we usually look at first in our astrology. And in fact, we would normally go through the seven traditional planets and then the modern planets being the later invented and not visible with the naked eye planets of Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. The seven modern planets would be Sun, Moon. I know they're not actually planets, but just for the astrological side of things, Sun, Moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Saturn, and Jupiter. But Chiron is a really exciting little chap. And this particular video that I am going to load for you first is around the myth of Chiron. We did the myth of Inanna as well for our Venus understanding, because oftentimes, and I know I've probably said this before, certainly said this before, the myth helps us to understand and integrate the thing, the body that we're looking at, the in this case, asteroid, planetoid. So what we're going to talk about is the myth behind Chiron, and then allow that to kind of filter into how we read Chiron, which we'll see in a future video. So Chiron basically was the son of the nymph Philyra and Zeus, or actually, sorry, not Zeus, Kronos, Saturn. So basically what happened was he was obviously, as many of the gods are in these stories, he was often having affairs. And in order to hide that he was off on such a tryst from his wife, Kronos turned himself into a beautiful stallion because he saw this nymph that he'd had a thing for. She at the time was also transformed into a horse. So needless to say, when her baby, they conceived a child, and when her baby was born, she thought, horror of horrors, what monster have I produced? Because out came a centaur, half man, half horse. And he didn't even fully look like the other centaurs. I can't remember if his front legs were actually human legs, and then he had the back. There is some aspect of how he looked that also wasn't exactly centaur through and through. But anyhow, so now she was so devastated by this creature that she left him for dead. And what happened was he was found and rescued by some people on this that wandered by, and then given to Apollo, who ended up raising and rearing and training him. And Apollo is the sun god, twin brother to Artemis, and Artemis is a moon goddess. So interesting here for me, because we tend to think of the sun as being this bright, very strong masculine, and then the moon as being this more feminine and more musical and artistic. But actually in the Apollo Artemis, they're kind of two sides of each other in many ways, but he is the one who is interested in music and art and healing. And so this is what he trained Chiron in, these traits. But his sister was also training, and she was a huntress and a warrior, and trained more in those sides of things, which also come closer to what we often look at as the masculine, the Mars type things versus the Venus type things. So I quite like that there's a little bit of a flipping the script here with the energies of Apollo and Artemis. And that also very much does integrate into Chiron and how he's reared. So he's raised by these two, mainly by Apollo, but by basically these twins, the aspect of feminine and masculine, who taught him not in the conventional way in some ways, as we know it today in any case. And he ended up becoming a very renowned healer. He was extremely intelligent, he learned very well, and he had such a vast body of information that he became this amazing healer that was well respected and renowned and could basically fix anybody of anything. He also was a trainer of warriors, including, or heroes, as they were more looked at in those days, including Hercules, or he's often called Heracles. And Heracles was one of his favorite pupils, and he would teach them in the rites of how to go and do their, what are those things called, where they have to go and do those tasks in order to get through their hero training, so to speak, or to come out fully on the other side a hero. And of course, these heroes were all demigods, so half god, half human. And he himself was a demigod, half nymph, half god. So he did all this training, and there was all the other centaurs were kind of rowdy and riotous, and they weren't animal enough to be animal, and they weren't human enough to be human, and they would just create drama. They would rape and pillage and just a bit of a mad bunch. And he wasn't like that at all. He was much more refined. But what happened is the one time the centaurs came galloping through, creating a drama, and the heroes were trying to calm the waters. And somewhere along the way, accidentally, Chiron got a poisoned arrow from Heracles's bow in his thigh. And because it was a poisoned arrow, he couldn't heal the wound. But he, of course, this renowned healer who could heal next to everything, could not heal his own wound. And not only that, because it was poisoned, it was this constant pain. It needed constant work. He maybe would use some kind of balm that would work for a little while, and then it would start festering up again. It was just this constant problem. And unfortunately, he couldn't do very much about it. So what happened was he continued in this vein for about 900 years, just struggling and suffering with this pain and trauma. And eventually, he couldn't do it anymore. He'd done a lot of training of physicians. He'd done a lot of training of heroes. He'd healed many, many people. And it was time, but he couldn't die. And in fact, he was half brother, of course, to Zeus, who in planetary terms is Jupiter. So Zeus had punished Prometheus, another immortal, for giving fire to the humans. And we're not going to delve too deeply into that myth, but basically his punishment from Zeus, half-brother to Chiron, was to be chained to a rock on a mountain and have his liver picked out by crows every day, only to rebuild and reform in the night, and that would happen again the following day. So angry was he that we humans had been given fire. And Chiron convinced his half-brother that he would take the place of Prometheus. He would suffer and endure this trauma, but be made mortal, and he would then die. And Prometheus would be forgiven his terrible, terrible crime of giving humans fire. And so this is what he did, and he ultimately was able to die, and Zeus agreed to allow Prometheus to continue on his way. And when Chiron died, Zeus put him in the sky in a constellation. So that's the myth around Chiron. And there's some very important things that really help to play into how this impacts us in astrology. The first thing that Chiron is kind of known for is the wounded healer, and I'm going to bring that back up again. But also I want you to think about the dual nature here, half man or woman, the intellect, the sort of more humanity side of things, half horse, more instinctual, more connected to nature and our sort of bestial ways. And this kind of contrast between the two sides of himself, and very much how that will come into our conversation around how it operates in the chart, which I'm going to jump into now. So thank you for listening, and let me just stop this recording and we'll jump into the next video.